All right, going to read a little bit of Elvis and Kathy. There she is, cute little Kathy, and there's Elvis over there talking to her. All right, we are going on stage, so we're going to get into chapter 2. Outside, I'm done with work. It's kind of late. Got some cicadas. The sun's setting. I love that over there. It's one of my favorite views when the sun is setting and the golden color lands on the bushes, the trees over there. Love it. All right, let's get into Elvis and Kathy's story. So we're in chapter 2. Life is but a day at most by Robert Burns. Okay. All right. I was suddenly startled out of my long reverie when I felt the plane dropping altitude for a landing. So remember, they all were on their way to Maine, and they just got news that Elvis had passed away. And so they've turned around to go back to drop everybody off. I think they had picked up some people in Las Vegas, some in, and then some in LA. That's where they originated. So they're going back to drop people, take them all back home. And so she's reminiscing about their life together while she's on the airplane. So that's what she's talking about. I was suddenly startled out of my long reverie when I felt the plane dropping altitude for a landing. We were back in Las Vegas where it had all started, and I needed air desperately. When we were on the ground, I told comedian Jackie Kahane that I wanted to get off the plane for a moment and just get some fresh air. She's talking about back in Las Vegas where it had all started, talking about her relationship with Elvis. In 1970, August of 1970 is when she joined up with his group. To the month, 7 years to the month that she knew him. No, Kathy, you can't do that. The airport is swarming with reporters just waiting to nab any one of us. I think it's best if you stay right here. I knew the last thing I wanted to do right then was to talk to the press. So I stayed, and at last we took off once again, this time for Los Angeles. I don't know now, but someone had called my home, and Colette Doty, a friend who took care of my horses and worked for me, was waiting for me at LAX. She was also the one who had brought me to the airport only a few hours before. I still don't know how they managed it. But we all got out of that airport without speaking to one reporter. Although I understand there were newspaper, magazine, and television people everywhere. I wonder how they did that. Ducking reporters at both airports made me think about what I had said in Pueblo. Someone said, "Well, it's over," after hearing that Elvis had died. "No," I said, "it's not over yet. This is not the end. Actually, it's not over even today." All right, let me switch my pages here, because this is my printed book. All the way home, driving silently with Colette, I thought of the last telephone call I had received from Elvis. He had just phoned to talk, which was not unusual. I remember saying, "Why another tour? Why not rest? You're sick, Elvis, and you should just forget working for a while. Tours and concerts just take too much out of you." "I can't, Kathy. I can't stop right now. The Colonel owes a lot of money in gambling debts, and some of the guys will be in bad financial shape if I don't keep working. They have families to look after. You know, I have 300 people who depend on me." What had seemed so important to Elvis only a few days before certainly wasn't very important now. But then I faced another fact. I know Elvis couldn't have stayed home waiting for time to pass. He always had to be on the go, out there touching his fans, singing and entertaining. Staying home for Elvis would have been another kind of death, one that he couldn't have tolerated. "The telephone at home has been ringing off the hook," Colette said. That right there, before I continue, is very telling of Elvis's mental state when before he passed, and why he would not stop, and why he would take the drugs that kept him going. Not illegal drugs to get high, but he took the drugs that helped him not feel the pain, helped him give him the energy to get out there and sing. Helped his stomach would hurt because of the problem in his intestines, and he had arthritis in his neck and back, and sometimes he would sprain an ankle or sprain a leg or something, and that had to heal up too, and he would get headaches, so he would take medication to help with the pain, and then he had the glaucoma, and he had he would take medication for that, and then he would take the medication to help him sleep so he would be well rested. But then he would need to take medication to wake up. I mean, he basically was taking the medication to be the Elvis Presley that his fans were expecting when they went to a show. And they always say that he took more medication when he was on tour, and that would also take a lot out of him. It would take a lot out of his body. And then he would get out there and he had high blood pressure. He took medication for that. And just so much, the poor man had so much on him, and the stress, and oh my gosh. And he had all these people waiting on him that depending on him to make money, to pay them. And so he would take the stuff to keep going, But then, like what she said here, is he couldn't just stay at home. He was an on-the-go kind of person. I guarantee you, if he took the test to see if he was like a water or earth or fire or wind, he probably was fire and wind. I don't know. He could have been earth because of the responsibility, but he definitely was fire, I think. So he couldn't have just stayed at home. He had to keep going. So Colette says, the telephone at home has been ringing off the hook, Colette told me, but that didn't surprise me, and I couldn't think of anyone I really wanted to talk to right then except Elvis, and now that was never going to happen again. She wanted to talk to Elvis. They were so close. When we got to my house, I refused to look at my messages and went right to my room. I was bone weary and fell across the bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Elvis and how it had all started. And the past came back to me as if it had happened yesterday. Later, I realized that it was 7 years to the very day from the time I met him until the day he died. What a profound coincidence. Elvis always talked about the importance of numbers and dates, because dates are numbers. And I have to go back. Did she meet him on August 16th? Let me check right quick. Well, I couldn't find it in that first chapter, but that's really weird if she met him on August 16th, which it probably would have been about the same time, because she met him in August. Like, August was a huge month for big events that happened to Elvis. So he met a couple of his girlfriends that he went out with in August, and but he typically had a show in Las Vegas in August, either like August, September, and then he would come back and do another one in the late winter, spring, kind of like February, March, maybe April. So anyway, this was she met him in August. Okay. Later, I realized it was 7 years to the very day from the time I met him until the day he died. What a profound coincidence. After that first visit to Elvis's penthouse suite, I had been more than a little confused. That fateful morning seemed so far away and yet so close. I had no idea then that it was to be a turning point in my life. My mind turned back again to Las Vegas the morning after my first visit to Elvis's suite, and the thought of that day just 7 years ago seemed like a century away, and the bittersweet memory brought tears to my eyes. Bless. Oh, wow, it's amazing. 7 years is all that went by. And he was such a high, and he was on a high. And boy, he was on a high in the way he looked. And then 7 years later, his body had just collapsed. And as much as his mind and energy and mind and he's willing, the mind was willing, the body just couldn't hold up. He was like a racehorse that ran himself to death. I remember so well how I felt when I woke up. I had been dreaming a vivid, colorful Disney dream, hearing the song, "A dream is a wish your heart makes." Was I Cinderella? He certainly was Prince Charming. In the light of day, everything seemed more clear, and I felt I had my strange feelings under control. I was surprised at the way my mind had been working the sleepless night before. First and foremost was my upbringing. Because of my father's position with the church, I had spent most of my formative years attending Sunday school or singing in the choir. I also had been a steady churchgoer, even as a teenager, because attending all church functions was mandatory in our household. I attended the Southern Methodist Church for 10 years, was a member of the Congregational Church for 1 year, and 10 years in the Baptist Church. My daily diet of morality was now a part of me. Sex before marriage was simply not condoned by me, nor by any church I had ever attended. But one of the most sinful things of all was to commit adultery. And Elvis was very married, no matter what he said about his arrangement with Priscilla. And he was the father of a child. Actually, this was the most sobering thought of all. Having an affair with a married man? I feared the consequences much more than I feared losing my virginity. I vowed then and there that I would never see Elvis Presley socially again, and I certainly, hold on, gotta change pages, certainly wouldn't be alone with him in his bedroom. That settled. I felt better. After all, I reasoned, I was a grown woman with a mind of her own, a career that I loved, and I didn't need to complicate my life. Besides, the days were going to be very fast, and soon the Las Vegas show would close. Elvis would go on tour, and I would return home to Los Angeles. I decided I should tell him as soon as possible. The show went on as usual. Elvis was charged up, a real dynamo. Afterwards, one of the bodyguards came up to me and said Elvis wanted me to come up to his suite again. I said yes, knowing I needed to tell him how I felt and what I had decided would be best for the both of us. When I arrived, more than a little anxious, the suite was filled with people laughing and talking as usual. As soon as Elvis saw me, he took me by the hand and said, "Hi, sweetheart, I missed you. I couldn't wait to see you again. It felt so good knowing you were on stage with me. Man, oh man, why couldn't they have sent me a big, ugly chick who could sing? You know, you're so little, you're hidden in the back. I want you up front with the sweet inspirations tomorrow night so they can see you." Doesn't he have a way of making you feel good? Good grief. Oh my gosh. I wanted to speak out, but evidently the television was a little too loud for him, and he yelled over at Charlie Hodge, "Charlie, turn that television down. It's too loud." With that, one of the girls in the room yelled back, "Why don't you do it yourself?" Elvis was stunned, and then I saw tears welling up in his eyes. Why did she say that to me? He had a pained look on his face, and I could see he was very hurt. It made me feel terrible to see him like that. And I touched him on the shoulder. "She didn't mean anything by that. She was just trying very hard to get your attention." He thought about it for a moment and then smiled at me. "I guess you're right, Kathy. Kathy, you're so good for me. You help me see things the way they really are." After that, we both left the room and went into his bedroom. Isn't that a bless? That girl was so sarcastic and yelled that back to him, and it just was like a dart that the devil was using to hurt him. Then Kathy had the sound of reason, wisdom, and he chose to believe that. Elvis is a good role model, I think, in a lot of ways. Yes, he had his faults, just like everybody. He's human. And when it came to girls, but he did respect them. He just was not faithful. And like he told his cousin Billy, he probably should have never been married in the first place. But he didn't know that in the beginning. He wanted, like, his role models were his parents, and he wanted to have a life and a family and get married and have children. He didn't know he was going to end up being the most famous person in the whole world and would have beautiful women at his access whenever he wanted them. Not that he wanted them. He didn't like cheap women that threw themselves on him. But he had a huge respect for them and admired their beauty, and he was trying to find someone who really fit him, and Priscilla was not the one. She didn't want to have anything to do with his spiritual life. And so when he bonded with someone right away, it was typically someone that was spiritual and had a relationship with God, just like him. That's why he would take them into their room and they would read the Bible. He wanted to see their reaction when he said that. So anyway, back to this. I digress. But he chose to listen to the voice of reason, which was godly. Think the best of other people and let it roll off your back. Not be offended. After that, we both left the room and went into his bedroom. I took his hand and looked at him. I had to tell him how I felt. Elvis, I have to tell you, I can't see you anymore. I just don't feel right. I care for you very much, but Elvis put his fingers to my lips. Shh, I know. Just relax. I'm not forcing you to do anything you don't want to do. I need you as a friend, Kathy. So don't worry, please. Okay, baby? Now, here's that book I was telling you about. See, he needed her as a friend to talk God and biblical things. Then he handed me a copy of Impersonal Life, and inside the cover he had written, "To Kathy with love always, EP." He had purposely misspelled the word always, making it all-ways, ALLWAYS, instead. With love always. I was thrilled and thanked him. He took the book from me and began reading some excerpts. He began turning pages, and his excitement was obvious. "Listen to this," he said. "I am not your intellect and body, and this message is to teach that you and I are one. The words I herein speak, and the main burden of these instructions, is to awaken your consciousness to this great fact." Now Elvis leaned closer to me. "You cannot awaken to this fact until you can get away from the consciousness of the body and intellect, which so long have held you enslaved. You must feel me within before you can know I am there." He capitalizes some of the words, or at least the way she writes it. So I'm trying to emphasize when he says that. So you can know I am there. Now, on the next page, it tells you how to do it. Elvis read again. "Sit quietly in a relaxed position, and when wholly at ease, let your mind take in the significance of these words. Be still and know I am God." "Be still and know I am God," I said. "That's always been one of my favorite biblical scriptures and one of my favorite gospel hymns. Do you know that song?" He nodded yes and went on to say, "Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is at hand, not far off, right here." Elvis emphasized it by looking at his outstretched hand, then clasping his hands to his chest. And he clasped them to his chest. He quietly quoted, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." So I really get what he's doing here because he's learning how to apply God's word to his life and live it. And I think that that's really hard for a lot of people to do. They might know the Bible and know the scriptures, but they don't know how to apply it. And I, for one, learned Joyce Meyer was huge in helping me learn how to apply God's Word to my life and really learn how to use it. And the way she explained it, it opened my eyes and my ears. God worked through her. So I think that is what Elvis is doing. So Joyce did a lot of work, and then she now, as her job, relays that to other people and helps them. And I think that is what Elvis was doing. He was learning because he had the foundation of the Bible blazed on his heart. But he needed to learn how to apply it and live it. And he had had a lot of life, a lot of living, had done some things, wanted forgiveness, and he was learning how to live the life that God wanted him to live. So I think that these books were helping him learn to do that. And he needed to talk to people about it. And boy, that Memphis Mafia, those people, and Priscilla, those people around him didn't know any of that stuff. So he was very close to his Aunt Nash, who was a Christian, was a female pastor who was not popular back in the 70s to have females. But he and his grandmother, who was also a huge Christian lady, he would spend time with them a lot when he was at home. He would call his Aunt Nash, who lived on the grounds in a trailer. He had had a trailer moved there that she and her husband and her 2 girls lived there. And he would call her in sometimes and have one-on-one talks with her. And they would go upstairs to his room. Sometimes they would talk in his grandma's room. So he just needed people he could talk to. But they were older. Well, Aunt Nash was only 8 years older than him. They were almost like sister and brother. But he just needed people. She didn't travel with him, so he needed people on the road, people around him. So that's what he really is drawn to Kathy. Not for sex. But she is pretty, but he's bonding with her on this level, spiritual level. And she also loves horses, and she loves music and singing, and she's very knowledgeable about all that. So they have a lot in common. Okay, so the kingdom of heaven is within you, he said, clasping his hands to his heart. We went on from one topic to another, but almost ending up on the subject that interested us most, spiritual awakening. Then, I guess I was beginning to look tired, because he took me by the hand and led me back to my room, kissed me gently on the mouth, and said good night. Respectful, but Elvis loved to kiss women. His lips were made for kissing. Those little pouchy lips of his, pouty-looking, puffy lips of his. They were made to kiss. God gave them to him, and he loved to kiss women. Did not necessarily have to have sex with them, but he sure did love to kiss them. So kissing her goodnight, it was called for to do it on the lips. Before I went to sleep, the phone rang, and it was Elvis. Kathy, I feel just like I was in high school again. Do you feel the same way? How do you feel? Yes, I said. I feel that way too. And then we talked some more. I was ecstatic about finding a man that I could share my favorite topics with, God and music. It was as if we could never run out of things to say to one another. He asked me to come up to the penthouse after the show the next day, and this time there wasn't any hesitation on my part when I said yes. I was surprised at how quickly I had responded to his request. Was there any point at all of making strong resolves when it came to Elvis? No matter how many lectures I gave myself, it seems that every determined resolution went out the window where he was concerned. It's like the minute you saw him and he'd start talking to you, you just flat. The next night after the show, I returned to the penthouse suite. There were some of the same people and some new faces, but I wasn't looking at them. Elvis walked up to me, put his arm around my shoulders, and led me to his private suite, into his bedroom. Actually, the suite was always so filled with people. The bedroom was the only place we could be that gave us any privacy. He started talking to me again about all sorts of things. I'm afraid I don't remember what exactly, but I do know I loved the sound of his voice and the way he looked at me. That's what people say. His voice, he's very soft-spoken when he's just talking to people. Very soft-spoken. It's a very soothing voice. Again, a gift God gave him. And he would look at people in their eyes and talk to them. I just can't imagine. He would look directly at them. And he told her, "All I want is to get to know you better as a friend." I remember him saying that. And of course, I agreed. Tired of sitting on the little sofa, he led me to the bed and assured me it was all right. "Nothing will happen unless you want it to," he promised, which didn't exactly ease my fears. Suddenly he said, "I want you to stay with me all night, Kathy." "I don't think so," I said, shaking my head. "I promise you nothing will happen unless you want it to," just like I said. And somehow I knew he was telling me the truth. I decided to stay. And that's what it was. I mean, he was willing, but only if the girl wanted it. He never, ever pushed himself on a girl. Of all of the girlfriend stories, Priscilla, everybody, he never forced himself on anyone. But he wanted to have their company all night. He did not like to be in a bed alone. He didn't like to be alone. He wanted their company. It was reassuring to him. And that's all he wanted. He had bonded with Kathy, so now he wanted her to stay with him because he really liked her as a friend. But if she wanted to go further, he was willing. He was saying nothing will happen unless you want it to. Now, this may sound silly, but I realized that Elvis was a very lonely man. See, she has already realized it after knowing him for like a week and a half. He was surrounded by some pretty superficial thinkers, although he enjoyed talking about a variety of subjects. His interests were so varied and so widespread, and he pursued his studies so intensely that I felt sorry for him living in a goldfish bowl environment without much freedom to do what he wanted. But no matter how I rationalize, the plain fact is that I really wanted to stay. We began gently caressing, kissing, talking sweetly, and holding each other so closely. We were like one. Isn't that what June said? Isn't that what Lucy said? He would hold them so tight, they were like one. Whew, can you imagine? Because of the intense passion of the moment, I was sure he'd want even more from me, but he remained true to his promise. Still, there was so much conflict within me, and I know he sensed that. I felt so guilty denying him the physical love that he needed. I wondered how long he would be patient with me. Would I lose his love and even his friendship? Would he look for satisfaction for someone else? The questions my heart kept asking were too painful to think about. But he had broken down an important barrier, and I'm sure he realized that as much as I did. We drifted off to sleep, and I woke up several times that night, only to find Elvis also awake and looking at me. "Isn't it odd how often we wake up at the same time?" Elvis asked, smiling sweetly. I agreed it was odd, and it did happen to us many times after that. We seemed to be so aware of each other that we each sensed the slightest movement and even knew when the other simply opened his or her eyes. No matter what I felt that night, warmed by Elvis's arms and body, I was filled with guilt the next day. I thought everyone would think that we had been having wild sex, and I was mortified. But nobody reacted at all. It was as if they hadn't noticed a thing, and gradually, as the day wore on, I became more relaxed. The next night was much the same. We slept together again, and much to my chagrin, I felt very safe in this new role. I felt so secure, as if nothing in the world would happen to me or touch me as long as Elvis was there to hold me through the night. Didn't June say that same thing? And so did Lucy. They felt so secure with him. Again, it's an aura about him that he made them feel safe and nothing could happen to them. Well, to be honest, there wasn't much night left by the time we got to sleep. Remember, we didn't finish work until 2 o'clock in the morning because they had that midnight show. And then we would unwind for an hour or so, which meant it was nearly always 4 a.m. before we tried to go to sleep. And see, sometimes Elvis would have forgot the name of the gospel group that sang behind him, J.D. Sumner and the Stamps. Sometimes he'd have the Sweet Inspirations up there, and they would sing. He'd have the Voice group, those men that would back him up. He would have Charlie Hodge. They would all sing to unwind, but it's funny because he was saying, we would sing all night until the light comes. Well, that's because that was his daytime, I thought. I've thought about that before. It's like, golly, that's crazy. They sang all night. But honestly, they all went to bed about 5 or 6 in the morning anyway, 7 o'clock in the morning. So to be up all night singing, it wasn't like they were going to be going to bed anyway. So, but this has not happened yet for her. So she, this again is that first week and a half. And the first week he was with Priscilla. And now she's been there for a couple of nights, and they haven't been singing. He's just been wanting to get to know her. So he hadn't been wanting to sing all night long. Our routine was to go to bed, which meant it was nearly 4 a.m. before we tried to go to sleep. Our routine was to go to bed in the early morning hours and sleep until late afternoon. Because, he would get up and have breakfast, and then he would play at the 8:30 show. That was like, if we got up at 7 a.m. and went to work at 9 or 10, that's basically what it was for him. Flip that day. Before we went to bed, Elvis would give me one of his pajama tops to sleep in because I didn't feel comfortable bringing a nightgown of my own to the bedroom. He was always very solicitous and hospitable, almost fatherly about my well-being. He would set a glass of water on my nightstand, also a toothbrush, and he always asked before joining me in bed if there was anything else I needed. Is there anything else you need? I always felt he was really looking after me and was honestly concerned about my comfort and welfare. Elvis suffered from chronic insomnia and had for years, which is pretty general knowledge, and sleepwalking. One of the major causes of this was the fact that his mind was continually working. That's what I've heard him say, that his mind would not turn off. One of the major causes of this was the fact that his mind was continually working. He just couldn't seem to turn it off. He would think of adding songs to the show, or worry about somebody's welfare. Think of God, spiritual growth, an old hymn, something in his childhood, a motion picture he had worked on, or just trivia. He found it impossible to just shut his mind off and go to sleep. He was also a somnambulist, which is a sleepwalker. That's what that means. A somnambulist is someone who walks in their sleep. But obviously he told her what he was thinking about at night because she lists them all out here. She probably said, what kind of things are you talking about or thinking about? He's like, I've been thinking of an old hymn. I wonder if I should be singing it. Or if I can remember the words to, just like different things like that. We would get up and have breakfast in the penthouse bedroom or dining room. I usually had eggs over easy, 2 slices of bacon, toast, coffee, and orange juice. Elvis would order a Spanish omelet and an entire pound of bacon with black coffee and toast, or saltine crackers. Saltine crackers for breakfast? You knew he grew up poor when he wants saltine crackers for breakfast. He made a big thing out of that bacon, and he only ate a portion of it. So they all said he always wanted a pound, but he would only eat a little bit of it. It may have had a lot to do with the fact that he had grown up so poor, and they couldn't afford bacon. Also, he didn't want to call for another order of bacon, only to wait for an hour or longer for room service to show up with it. So by ordering a pound, bacon was always there if he wanted it, but he never ate a whole pound at once. That makes a lot of sense. Let's just go ahead and order a pound, and then we don't have to call again because we want 3 more slices. There had been a lot of surprises since I had joined the Elvis show, but what was really mind-boggling to me was the way Elvis fans reacted to him. It was almost like worship in a way, and a complete acceptance of the man. One morning when he was showering, and I was still in bed listening to him singing at the top of his lungs. So if you ever wondered if Elvis sang in the shower, there you go. I thought about this and then put my thoughts into words. Elvis, it's simply amazing to me to think how much power you have over people. I waited, thinking perhaps he hadn't heard me. But then he came out of the shower and walked over to me. His eyes were serious, and his face, still wet from the shower, looked almost boyish, but his answer was a thoughtful one. I guess I could influence people's thinking, he said. I guess I could influence them a lot. But I think it's important for me to just entertain. No heavy message. Make people happy. Help them. Forget all their troubles for a while. I think that's what I'm on this earth to do. I'll never forget that conversation because there were always people out there who wanted entertainers to influence voters or to preach causes. Elvis took his responsibility seriously. And more than any other star in show business, he could have swayed his fans in any direction. But he felt it was fine for other entertainers to take a stand on public issues if they so desired. He didn't think it was right for him to take advantage of his power to mold public opinion. Okay, came inside, the bugs are starting to show up. But I love that. I love that so much. He did not want to influence people's thinking. He knew he could do it, but he thought that he was here just to entertain. No heavy message, make people happy, help them forget all their troubles for a while. I think that's what I'm on this earth to do. And he did not want to take advantage of his power to mold public opinion. Way to go, Elvis. There should be a lot more entertainers today that did the same thing. Keep their opinions to themselves. All right. Charlie Hodge, Red West, Joe Esposito. All right. Dog tried to get in my lap. I couldn't see a thing. Let me get back to this. Charlie Hodge, Red West, Joe Esposito, and Sonny West would often join us for breakfast. They all had rooms at the penthouse. Well, I think Charlie and Joe had it in the penthouse. Red West and Sonny may have been down the hall. I don't know. Then Elvis and I will go back to bed and perhaps read or talk or get some sun if it wasn't unbearably hot on the terrace. He went out there with Linda. Linda talks about going out on the terrace and sunning. Elvis liked to get some sun on his face, have natural color. If we decided to sun, Elvis would rub suntan lotion on me because he was afraid I would burn. He would dip cotton pads in witch hazel for both of us and would place these pads on our eyes to protect the delicate skin in that area. Sometimes he would dig out little egg-shaped goggles and then laugh at how I looked with those crazy-looking things on my face. He got a kick out of that. Isn't that funny? Cotton pads and witch hazel. Afterwards, I would go to my room and get ready for the show. When the show was over at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the routine would start all over again. I remember one morning in the suite, Elvis, Charlie, and I were around the piano where we loved to gather and sing. Elvis started playing the piano, which wasn't unusual. I'd heard him play many times before during our gospel sing-alongs. Well, I guess they were having sing-alongs. She just didn't talk about it. But I was surprised and impressed to hear him playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and he played it quite beautifully. When Elvis was determined to learn something, he wouldn't let anything stop him. He'd practice that piece until he got it down perfectly. I'm going to have to listen to that. I know what it is. I just can't. I don't know the names of all the sonatas, Beethoven sonatas. So I'm going to listen to that. See what that sounded like. He was playing Beethoven? Elvis was playing Beethoven. Let that sink in for a minute. Elvis was playing Beethoven on the piano in his penthouse suite in Las Vegas. And he played it beautifully. He practiced the piece until he got it down perfectly. Later that afternoon on the terrace, Elvis and I began discussing gospel music and how it had influenced our lives. We compared favorite songs, and one we both agreed on was How Great Thou Art. He grinned when he said, "The only album I ever won a Grammy for was a gospel album. The title song was How Great Thou Art." We started humming it, and then we sang it as a duet, and we were children again. I love it. Let's do it again. We sang it again, and with his usual enthusiasm, he said, "Let's put it in the show." Is this when he started singing How Great Thou Art in the show? Was because he was practicing it and singing it with Kathy in the penthouse suite? That's cool. A gospel hymn in a Las Vegas show? Well, I don't know. But when Elvis decided to do something, he didn't waste time mulling it over. I just heard his cousin Donna talking about that. That's why I'm saying he was either fire or wind, because he didn't want to wait. He made a decision and he went with it. "Charlie," he called out from across the terrace, "we have to have a quick rehearsal. There's a song I want to put in the show tonight." Years before, Charlie had helped Elvis create a special dynamic arrangement of How Great Thou Art. So he called a fast rehearsal, and suddenly it was part of the show. I guess everybody came up to the room. And so it was that Elvis made a real breakthrough in Las Vegas. He broke away from the usual pattern and put in a gospel hymn. When the audience heard it that night, they went wild and gave him a rousing standing ovation. And Elvis just smiled and winked at me, as if to say, "See, I knew they'd like our kind of music. Even the people who come to Las Vegas are just like me." How Great Thou Art stayed in the show, and I always felt a little proud that I had helped contribute something to his performance. The Las Vegas run was about to close, and although I hated for it all to end, I was prepared to go home, had accepted some studio dates, and realized that my life would resume its normal course once I was back in Los Angeles. On the one hand, I was relieved, and on the other, I never wanted it to end. I was so torn and confused about leaving the show, but fate intervened. Millie Kirkham, who I had thought was coming back, wasn't really coming back at all. Everybody knew that in the first place, but didn't want to offer me the whole tour until they saw how I fit in. I was on trial, and they wanted to see how I worked out. Anyway, there it was, a chance to do the entire tour and stay with Elvis, or go home and chalk it up as just another experience in life, one that I would always cherish and remember. "Come on tour with us. Stay with the show," Elvis pleaded. "I hate the road. I really think I should go home," was my reply. I was trying to be sensible about the entire situation. "Stay with the show. I promise you we won't travel more than twice a year. Nothing tiring, and we will have fun," Elvis continued to plead. That was funny to begin with, and I should have gone home. Elvis saying that the tours wouldn't be tiring. Elvis couldn't walk into a room without causing havoc. All of his shows were dynamic, exciting, and being around him was like chasing a shooting star. However, I gave in. I said I would stay, and he was like a little boy at Christmas. And then he was always like that when he got his way. But then he was always like that when he got his way, which was most of the time. All excited like a little boy, jumping up and down. I don't know how I thought things would work out, but love does strange things to your mind, even the mind of a sensible person as I had always been. Here I was, Kathy Westmoreland, sleeping every night with a married man, not having sex, and going back on the road again, which I had vowed never to do. In fact, everything I vowed never to do, I was doing. I was angry and pleased with myself at the same time. It was all so complex and bewildering. And yet another problem had arisen near the end of the Las Vegas engagement. Elvis had received a death threat from an obviously mentally disturbed man. He had drawn a gun on a photograph right over Elvis's heart. Now, this wasn't the first threat against Elvis's life, but it was one that everyone was taking very seriously, including Elvis. The man wanted to be paid off. Vernon considered paying him, but a precedent would have been set, and so he decided against it. Elvis was nervous and mentioned it all the time. The fear was like a raging fever, and he just couldn't shake it. There were extra security men placed in the audience, and there was an ambulance waiting outside by the stage door in case of an emergency. Not only that, but the entire cast was told to hit the floor if we heard or saw anything unusual. This is pretty nerve-wracking for any entertainer while they are giving a performance, and it did bother Elvis because he would sit in bed studying that photograph, wondering over and over, I can't believe it. Why would this guy want to kill me? I've been so upset I can't even go to the bathroom. And he couldn't sleep. Hold me, Kathy. I need you. You make me feel so peaceful. You calm me down. I said, believe God will protect you if we ask. I believe God will protect you if we ask him to. So we held hands and prayed that God would protect him. Oh my gosh. And he did. But in that moment, so scary. Hold me, Kathy. He was scared, bless his heart. So they held hands and prayed. Then he told me that men would sometimes ask him for his autograph, and when he was occupied signing something, they would try to take a punch at him. He couldn't understand this kind of violence. Luckily, the man who had drawn the gun on the photograph didn't follow through on his threat, but that occurrence was just the beginning of many such incidents, which I will go into later. You don't think about that much, but he had a lot of death threats. And Kathy, being on the tour with him and being a close friend, was aware of all this stuff, which is one of the good parts about this book and her perspective that a lot of people have. That she's able to, because she was so close to him, and on tour, part of his tour, she really was in the middle of all that. There were 3 planes on every tour. One was the singers and band, and one for Colonel Parker and his staff, who always left for the next city a day earlier than the rest of us. The other plane was for Elvis, his bodyguards, and whoever else Elvis wanted with him. He said, I want you to ride on the plane with me to Phoenix. Now, before you say yes, it's only fair to warn you that once you get on that plane with me, instead of the show plane, everyone will know we are together. I'll think about that, I said, but I knew what my choice would be. I wanted to fly with Elvis. I also knew by going on that plane with Elvis to Phoenix, I was announcing to the world, at least to my world, that Elvis and I were an item, that we were more than just friends, and I only hoped I could handle that. Elvis and I were also very concerned about keeping this affair from the press. And once again, that closing night, he walked up to me off stage just before I had to go on, his eyes twinkling and a mischievous grin on his face, and said in a low voice, "Well, are you going to have an affair with a married man?" Elvis! Oh my gosh. You knew what you were doing with that mischievous look in your eye, getting under her skin. Because look, she says, I wished he hadn't said it like that. It made me realize just where our relationship might lead. I didn't say anything, but how could I have replied when my legs suddenly felt as if they had turned into water? I walked out, took my place at the microphone, feeling lightheaded and dizzy. My dilemma must have shown on my face because he gave me a big smile, a wink, and then the show began. So when he came out, he looked over at her, gave her a big smile and a wink because he knew what he just told her and he knew how it would affect her. That night, I went to my room to pack up all my things, feeling more alone than I had ever been in my life. I felt guilty, humiliated, and demeaned. I called home and talked to my mother. I'm in love with a married man, I heard myself saying in a choked voice. My sweet, cheerful, and very wise mother listened quietly and then said, You have to do what you think is right, Kathy, and I know you'll do that. You must live your own life and make your own decisions. Feeling better, I packed to go on the road. Next stop, Phoenix in the Arizona sun. I felt alive and filled with excitement, but in the secret part of my mind, I harbored the fear that I might be headed for hell. Bless. She's excited, but in the back of her mind, she's just feeling so guilty. Oh, my goodness. How much more do we have of this chapter? I am at 52 minutes. 48. 5 more pages. Okay. The start of the trip to Phoenix was worse than I thought it would be. I blush even now when I think of it. I was planning on riding in Elvis's plane later in the day, but nobody knew that. So the band bus going to the airport waited for me. When they called to see why I was late, they were told I would be on Elvis's plane. So they headed off to the airport without me, and most people by then knew I hadn't taken the bus reserved for the troop. They might have suspected something up to that time, although they had no way of knowing for certain that what they had heard was only gossip. But the minute I got on the plane, a customized Fairchild with Elvis, I had crossed an invisible line in the star structure, and everybody knew what was going on. In the limo riding from the Phoenix airport to the hotel, Elvis was also in a better mood. Man, I'm glad I'm alive. That jerk will have to live with the fact he didn't get me, he said jubilantly. Whew, that's off his chest, that death threat. So I was a little less depressed when I arrived in Phoenix, at least about touring, but all the other worries and problems were still with me. And to make matters worse, there was a bomb threat and an argument with Elvis yet to come. After Elvis and I settled in his room, I told him I wanted to go over to the show arena with the group on the band bus. You don't have to do that, honey, he said. You can wait and go over with me. You know you don't go on till I do, so why don't you stay now and have dinner with me? I want to keep things on a professional level with the rest of the group, I replied, and keep everything as normal as possible. He understood. I got on the bus with the rest of the band, and as we were pulling up to the Phoenix City Civic Auditorium, we were dumbfounded to witness over 18,000 people marching en masse out of the auditorium instead of going in. Everyone was being cleared out so they could search the entire place after it was emptied. Oh my God, no, I thought, realizing they were going to search every person on the bus as well. The city officials were making certain we were unarmed or weren't hiding a bomb. There is something very distasteful, but very necessary, having strangers search you as if you were some kind of killer. This was my first experience in that kind of situation, and all the bodyguards warned me not to say a word to Elvis about the threat. The gun episode in Las Vegas had made him so upset and nervous that they felt telling him about a bomb threat right after the gun incident was just too much. So I didn't say a word to Elvis and tried not to show how nervous I was. I also found out that playing a huge arena like that one in Phoenix was much different than playing the hotel in Las Vegas. There were thousands and thousands of fans in the big auditorium, and they were all screaming for Elvis. Remember, Las Vegas only held like 2,500. They could squeeze some more in there and maybe have 3,000, but that's max, no more than that. But mostly it was 2,500 was a sellout. And here we're talking 18,000. It was absolute turmoil. The bomb scare really frightened me so much it was difficult to concentrate, and seeing that unruly mob of people made me realize that anything could happen. Anything was possible. Of course, by the next morning, Elvis had read about the bomb threat in the newspaper, and he was really angry with me. First, he woke me up, swearing and yelling. Then I heard him open the hall door and talk loudly to the security guard outside. He slammed the door and called room service for more newspapers. "I want all the Phoenix newspapers. Get me every damn one of them," he said, and slammed down the phone. When they were delivered, he rifted through them, looking and mumbling and swearing to himself, but loud enough to keep me awake. First, this son of a bitch in Vegas wants to kill me. Now some idiot wants to blow me to pieces. Why? He looked over at me, and his blue eyes were ablaze with anger. "Did you know about this bomb?" His voice was cold, and I wanted to stay under the covers and ignore his question, but he asked me again. Well, I knew, but I didn't want to admit that I knew. "Why didn't you tell me about it?" His voice was cold with anger. "Nobody wanted you to know because it might worry you after the Las Vegas threat," was my answer. "Everybody told me not to say anything to you." This sounded like an even weaker excuse when I heard myself saying it aloud. "There's no excuse as far as you are concerned. You should have told me. How can I ever trust you if you don't tell me important things like that? Don't ever keep anything from me again. You hear?" His voice was still angry. He hadn't liked my weak excuse either. It was the first time we came close to an argument, but I never tried to hide that kind of thing from him again. Maybe the bodyguards and the colonel could get away with it, but Elvis had let me know that he expected complete honesty and loyalty from me or else. Then he cooled down and was back to his old self again, but somehow I knew that those threats took a great deal out of him. Elvis was a loving person who gave love and affection to the world. He tried to puzzle it out, but he could never understand why anyone would want to kill him. And at that point in my life, I must admit I was equally as bewildered. I had always been very sheltered, actually. I didn't know about mental cases, fixations, and compulsive behavior patterns. I didn't then, but as the years went on, I found myself suspicious and wary of crowds in general, and some people in particular, but not Elvis. It seemed that no matter how many death threats, and there were many of them over the years, or how dangerous some of the fans could be, Elvis never lost faith in them. He might temporarily feel fear and anger, but he eventually rose above all the ugliness. It was a beautiful thing to watch, but more than a little dangerous, too. If the gun threat in Las Vegas and the bomb threat in Phoenix weren't enough chilling experiences for me, I almost got killed in St. Louis, which was our next stop after the Phoenix performance. And before I go into that, just my little part of that is here again, he is learning how, with God's help, to rise up and over the fear and just trust God to take care of him. He couldn't live his life in fear. He wanted to go out and entertain, and he wasn't going to let those people win. He was there to entertain the fans. The fans were the most important. The fans bought the tickets to the show. The fans bought his albums. The fans went to the crappy movies he made. He loved the fans and owed everything to them. He was there to give them a show, and he was going to give them a show, whether he was threatened or not. And so he had to rise above it to live his life. And he never lost faith in the fans, too. What does 1 Corinthians 13 say is to think good of other people? So he would continue to think good of the fans. And that, again, is an example of Elvis sharing his belief and faith with other people and how he lived his life. Okay. Now, we're going to move on to Phoenix. Our next stop was Phoenix. Oh, wait. Our next stop was St. Louis, which was our next stop after the Phoenix performance. When we arrived at the hotel in St. Louis, after a long plane ride, there were 3 limos, and one acted as a decoy limo by parking in front of the hotel, which I thought was very clever. The idea was to make the fans think Elvis and his troupe would be coming into the front entrance, when in fact, we were going to sneak in through the side door. I have never understood what kind of communication systems avid fans have about celebrities, but they do have one. I'm convinced of it. Anyway, when we got to the side door, the entire area was swarming with fans yelling for Elvis. Elvis smiled and waved at all of them and then said to me, before we got out of the car, "Hold on to my coat and we'll just storm through. Now hold on tight. Here we go." I held on as tight as I could, and all I could see were faces and arms and feel people trying to block our way to the door. And to my horror, Elvis gave a lunge, and I lost my grip on his coat. Suddenly, I was all alone with this mob. As I reached the door, one of the hotel's security guards thought I was a zealous fan and had no idea I was with the show. Suddenly, I felt this terrible pain. The guard had given me a real karate blow right to the neck. I saw stars and was just about ready to faint. "She's with us! She's with us!" One of the bodyguards was screaming at the guard over the chaos, but it was too late, and by then they were giving me the rough treatment. I was in pain and having trouble catching my breath, but finally I was inside the hotel and safe. There stood Elvis, laughing at me. "I told you to hang on to my coat," he said. I really wanted to hit him, and all I could think of saying was, what kind of a world do we live in, and what kind of people go around taking a karate chop at some small woman who couldn't be a threat to anyone? They are animals. I had come from a part of show business where the fans were well behaved. People might stop me for an autograph or talk about a talented nephew or niece. But in my world, they didn't try to tear your clothes off, and you didn't have people who were going to shoot you or threaten to blow you up, and certainly you didn't have people hitting you so hard it could put you in a hospital. What zany, sick kind of show business was this anyway? There was much more of this kind of violence to come, but I never got used to it, and even to this day, I don't understand it. One thing I should mention here is that a woman by the name of Patricia Parker had filed a paternity suit against Elvis, and he knew they would try to subpoena him as he signed autographs, so he was avoiding signing autographs. And it turned out his hunch was right. That's just how she did it, and Elvis had signed the subpoena acknowledgement, thinking it was just another fan. With that, Elvis got angry. "Let me take that damn detector test. Oh, wait. Let me take that damn lie detector test. Give me the blood test. Let's do it now. Anything to prove it isn't my baby." He took the blood test and lie detector test and passed both, proving to the court's satisfaction that he was innocent of the charges. We left St. Louis and headed for Detroit. So that must have happened in St. Louis. They left St. Louis and headed for Detroit. That night, Elvis and I were back in the bedroom of the Fairchild looking out the large picture at the crystal clear midnight sky. "Are you having a nice time?" he asked as we cuddled. "Uh-huh," I sighed. "Isn't it fun traveling like this?" he asked. Naturally, it was fun for me. He truly appreciated what he had and enjoyed living in the now at that moment and sharing it with me. It was a simple thing, gazing at the stars, holding hands. He liked to do that, didn't he? With all the girls. Look at the moon and the stars. There was something about that when he was growing up. He felt very connected to that. I think he talks about in June's book about staring at the moon and the moon carrying you up there. "Where do you want to go, honey? Just say the word. I'll take us there," he smiled. "Let's fly to the moon," I answered excitedly, and we flew. I don't really know what that means, but maybe that means their whole relationship. Now, if I thought the crowds in Phoenix and St. Louis were bad, they couldn't hold a candle to the ones in Detroit. They were wild, rude, and dangerous. And in the audience, I noticed for the first time policemen with helmets on and big billy clubs in their hands. They looked as big as army tanks and just as tough. This should have given me some security, but instead I felt even more baffled and shaken. What a mixed-up world when police have to protect a singer from being assaulted by the people who love him. During the Detroit show, they kept yelling, "Get the singers off the stage," because they wanted to get a better and less obstructive view of Elvis. They threw pennies and used flash bulbs from their cameras up on the stage. This may not sound serious, but believe me, it hurts, and I was worried about my eyes. I was cut on the head by a flash bulb, and pennies kept hitting my body. "Move the singers! Move the singers!" Now they were chanting in cadence. I wanted to run off the stage, but instead we all stood where we were, and Elvis calmed them down by singing. "Face it, Kathy," I said to myself, "you are traveling in a world where all the inmates have been let out of the asylum, and they are following you everywhere." As for Elvis, he seemed to thrive on all the excitement he generated. "Lord have mercy," he would say, "and I thought no one would come out and see me." I kept silent. There was simply no adequate response to a statement like that. "Lord have mercy, and I thought no one would come out to see me." Elvis. Oh my gosh. There is simply no adequate response to a statement like that. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. We left Detroit and headed for Miami, Tampa, and then Mobile, Alabama. This part of the trip brought home to me the precarious position I had accepted when I became a part of Elvis's life. Elvis had many relatives in the South, and whenever he played in southern cities, many of them came to see the show. This meant no more visits to Elvis's suite as long as they were there, and our meetings were pretty much limited to backstage. But there, he was so keyed up and involved, and I was concentrating so hard on the show that we seldom saw one another, let alone talked. I had never felt so much despair and so depressed. I felt as if I had been deserted and cast aside. I had given Elvis my heart, and now he had no time for me. I also realized the role I played in his life. I was the other woman. But if I had been just a casual friend, we would have been able to be seen in public. It seemed so mixed up, so topsy-turvy, so unfair. I felt ill most of the time. I couldn't eat, and I learned for the first time in my life that one could nearly perish if they have a broken heart. I had fallen in love for the first time ever, and even though I understood about his family visiting and his being married, that was only an intellectual exercise. Emotionally, I didn't understand it at all. I couldn't wait until the time the tour was over and I could go home. I was so hurt, that I wasn't even sure I wanted to see Elvis Presley again as long as I lived. All right. That's the end of that chapter. So, wow. She has fallen in love with him. And it's a crazy world they're in. And the people in the crowd, goodness gracious, she is not used to any of that. But she's doing it all with him. Crazy, right? Whew. So after the tour, does she go back to Los Angeles and he goes back to Memphis? Guess we'll have to find out. So in the next chapter, which we're going to wait because this is an hour and 10 minutes, almost an hour and 11. So I'm going to stop and I will catch you guys later. Hope you enjoyed this long reading. All righty. Bye.